The silent passenger. I've spent most of my life working the night shift at the metro station. The job isn't exciting, but it's steady, predictably at least. It used to be. Now I can't even step into a station without feeling my skin crawl. It started about a month ago. I was the only staff member on duty, working the late shift at an old metro station that had been in operation for decades. The place had its quirks: flickering lights, the occasional power surge, the way the air always felt just a little too cold. That night, I was sitting in the control room, monitoring the security cameras. Everything was normal. The last train had come and gone, and the platform was empty. Then I saw him, a man, standing completely still at the far end of the platform. At first I thought he had missed the last train, but something about him was off. He wasn't moving. He wasn't pacing or checking his phone like stranded passengers usually do. He was just standing there, perfectly still, staring at the dark tunnel where the train had disappeared. I grabbed the station's microphone and pressed the button to speak over the intercom. "Sir, the last train has already left. We're closing soon." No reaction. I leaned closer to the screen, adjusting the camera angle. He was tall, wearing an old, tattered coat. Something about him made my stomach twist, but I couldn't figure out why. I switched to another camera, one closer to where he was standing, and that's when I realized I couldn't see his face. Not because of the camera quality or the lighting. It was something else. His face was just wrong, blurry, distorted, like the static on an old TV. A shiver crawled down my spine. I turned away from the screen, shaking my head. I was probably just tired. I decided to go down to the platform and escort him out myself. Big mistake. The platform. He stepped onto the platform, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty station. The air was colder here, much colder than it should have been. I called out, "Sir?" Nothing. I walked toward the far end of the platform, my flashlight casting long shadows across the tiles, and then, just as I reached the spot where I had seen him, he was gone. No footsteps leading away, no sound of movement, just gone. I swallowed hard and turned back toward the stairs, ready to get the hell out of there. Then I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind moving through the tunnels, but then I heard it again, closer this time. My name. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the darkness. Nothing. The station was empty. Completely, utterly empty. I walked back up the stairs to the control room, forcing myself to breathe normally. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the security cameras had glitched, and the man had just left without me noticing. I sat back down, my heart still pounding. I flipped through the camera feeds again, and that's when I saw the train. The last train. It was impossible. The system was shut down. There were no more scheduled arrivals. But there it was, captured on the platform camera. Train pulling into the station without a driver. The doors slid open with a slow, mechanical hiss, and then he stepped inside. The man, the one who had been standing on the platform. Except now, he wasn't facing the tunnel, he was facing the camera. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I could see his face now, or rather, the absence of one where his features should have been. There was nothing but shifting darkness, like a void. Like the tunnel itself had swallowed him whole. The train doors slid shut. The lights flickered, and then the train was gone. Vanished. No record of it. No trace on the system logs, just gone. After Mothi quit my job the next morning, I didn't explain why. How could I? Who would believe me? But I've started noticing things every night. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I hear the sound of a distant train whistle. Even when I'm miles from any station, even when I know there shouldn't be one, and sometimes when I walk past darkened subway entrances, I swear I see him standing there waiting for the next train. The whispering wind on the farmy was never one to believe in ghosts, curses, or the supernatural. I've spent my life working on this farm, just like my father and his father before him. The land has always been good to us until the night. Everything changed. It started with the wind. The farm had always been a quiet place, peaceful in a way that made you feel grounded. The wind would rustle through the fields, the crickets would sing at night, and the rhythm of life stayed predictable. But one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the air shifted. The wind wasn't normal that night. It wasn't the kind that came in soft waves or sudden gusts. It was a whispering wind, moving through the fields in unnatural patterns, carrying voices, low murmuring, almost human voices. At first I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. I had been working late, and exhaustion could do strange things. But the more I listened, the more certain I became. It wasn't just the wind. It was something inside the wind. I stepped onto the porch, scanning the fields. The barn stood tall in the distance, its doors slightly ajar. I frowned. I always made sure to shut them tight at night. With a sigh, I grabbed my flashlight and started walking. As I got closer, the whispering grew louder. It wasn't coming from the barn, it was coming from the fields. Something was moving through the tall crops. I shined my light toward the noise. The corn stalks rustled, parting ever so slightly, but I couldn't see anything inside. The wind picked up, carrying the whispers past my ears. I swear, I heard my name. I took a step back, gripping the flashlight tighter. "Hello." My voice sounded small against the vast, empty land. No answer. Then, something moved. A shape just barely visible between the stalks. A figure too tall, too thin, its body swaying with the wind as if it was part of it. My stomach twisted, then it stopped swaying. It turned, and it looked at me. I can't explain how I knew. I couldn't see a face, couldn't make out any features, but I felt its gaze, heavy and unnatural, drilling into me like an unspoken warning. The whispering became a chant, overlapping voices weaving together in an unsettling harmony. I took a shaky step back. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching, waiting. Then, the wind stopped. Complete silence. No crickets, no rustling leaves, no distant hum of the night, just nothing. A second later, the barn door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the walls. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest. The entire farm seemed to be holding its breath. When I turned back toward the field, the figure was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light on, every door locked. I sat on the couch with my shotgun across my lap, listening to the silence, waiting for the whispering to return. It didn't, not that night, but the next morning, as I walked outside, I found something that chilled me to my core. Footprints leading from the field to my house. And then they stopped. No return tracks. No signs of where the thing had gone. Just a perfect trail leading straight to my porch, ending inches from the door dot. As if it had been standing there, watching me. I wanted to pack my bags and leave right then. But this farm, this land had been in my family for generations. I wasn't going to be scared off by something I couldn't even explain. But that night, the whispering returned. I barely stepped outside before I heard it, soft at first, almost like a sigh carried on the wind. Then louder, clearer, closer. This time, it didn't just call my name. It pleaded, "Let me in." I slammed the door and locked it. Whatever was out there, it wasn't human. It wasn't some lost traveler or prankster trying to scare me. It was something else, something that had been waiting, watching, learning. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. I kept the lights on, the doors shut, the shotgun loaded. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape in the fields, swaying, whispering, waiting. Then, one night, the whispering stopped. The wind returned to normal. The farm fell back into its familiar rhythm, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe it was over, but it wasn't. A week later, I found something in the barn. At first, I thought it was just an old scarecrow. toppled over in the hay. But as I got closer, I saw that it wasn't stuffed with straw. It was filled with bones, human bones. That was the final straw. I packed my bags and left the farm that same day. I don't know who or what left that thing in my barn, and I don't want to know. But sometimes, even miles away, even in the safety of my new home, I hear the wind whisper, and sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I swear I hear a voice right outside my window. Let me in. The shadows beneath the waves. I've spent my whole life in the ocean. Diving has always been my escape, my passion, my second home. But after what I saw that day, I swore I would never set foot in the water again. It started like any other dive. I had heard stories, local legends, about a shipwreck that had vanished decades ago, swallowed by the sea under strange circumstances. Most people believed it was just a myth, but I had spoken to other divers who claimed to have seen parts of it hidden deep beneath the waves. I wanted to see it for myself. With my gear secured and my oxygen tank full, I slipped beneath the surface, letting the water swallow me whole. The descent was smooth. Schools of fish darted past me, and the sunlight above danced on the ocean floor. I took a deep breath through my regulator, exhaling slowly as I searched for the wreck. Then, I saw it. A jagged structure loomed ahead, its rusted hull half buried in the sand. As I swam closer, the full shape of the ship came into view. Metal, shattered wood, gaping holes where the ocean had claimed its prize. That's when I felt it. The water around me had changed. It was darker here, even though I hadn't gone that deep. The temperature had dropped, an unnatural cold that seeped through my wetsuit and into my bones. The silence was suffocating. Even the fish had disappeared. Something was wrong. I tried to shake off the feeling and pressed forward, shining my light through the broken windows of the wreck. Inside, scattered objects lay frozen in time, tools, equipment, even the remains of furniture. It was eerily intact. Then, something moved. At first, it was just a flicker, a shadow shifting in my peripheral vision. My breath hitched as I turned, sweeping my light across the wreckage. Nothing, just the ship, silent and undisturbed. I told myself I was imagining things. The isolation, the darkness, it could play tricks on the mind. Then I saw it again. This time, it wasn't just a shadow. It was a shape, a figure. Something was inside the wreck. My pulse pounded in my ears as I hovered just outside the ship. I wasn't alone down here, but that was impossible. There were no other divers scheduled for the day. Slowly, I swam toward the opening of the wreck, my fingers tightening around my flashlight. I peered inside. The darkness was thick, swirling like ink, shifting as if something was moving just beyond the reach of my light. And then, I saw them. Two eyes. Cold, empty, watching me from the abyss. My lungs tightened. My instincts screamed at me to move, but my body was frozen. The figure didn't swim, didn't drift. It stood there, unaffected by the currents. Then, ever so slightly, it tilted its head. Distorted and impossible in the deep rippled through the water. A deep, vibrating hum that rattled through my bones. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't a diver. This thing did not belong here. Panic surged through me. I kicked hard, pushing away from the ship, my breath coming in frantic bursts. Bubbles erupted around me as I fought against the crushing silence of the deep. I didn't look back. I couldn't. As I ascended, the water grew colder, the pressure wrapping around me like an iron grip. I could still feel it watching me. Even though I was leaving, it knew me now. Breaking through the surface, I gasped for air, flailing toward the boat. Hands grabbed me, pulling me aboard, voices shouting, asking what had happened. But I couldn't answer. I just stared back at the water, waiting, expecting that thing to rise after me. It never did. I never spoke about what I saw that day. I left the ocean behind, walked away from the only life I had ever known. But sometimes, in the dead of night, When the world is silent and I am alone with my thoughts, I hear it, that deep, droning hum, calling me back to the depths. Asterisk. The shrouded figure in the mountain cabini. A.M. Emily. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. At least, not until I spent that night alone in my family's mountain cabin. Looking back, I wish I had never gone there. The cabin had been in my family for decades. My grandparents had built it as a retreat from the chaos of city life. After they passed, my parents kept it maintained, but rarely visited. It was nestled deep in the mountains, surrounded by endless pine trees, far from any neighbors or towns. My parents warned me about staying there alone, not because of ghosts, but because of how isolated it was. Still, I craved solitude. I had just gone through a brutal breakup, and I needed time away from everything: work, my phone, the noise of the city. So, I packed my bags, stocked up on supplies, and drove up into the mountains. The first day was peaceful. I spent my time reading by the fireplace, taking a short hike along a nearby trail, and simply enjoying the stillness. It was exactly what I needed, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, something changed. The atmosphere in the cabin felt off. The silence was different. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was oppressive, unnatural. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. I shook off the feeling and went about my evening. I made dinner, poured myself some wine, and curled up on the couch with my book. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but that was normal. What wasn't normal, however, was the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to ignore it, but my eyes kept drifting toward the large window that overlooked the forest. The porch light barely illuminated the tree line. For a moment, I thought I saw something, a figure standing just beyond the reach of the light. But when I blinked, it was gone. I told myself I was imagining things, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But I still locked all the doors and checked the windows twice before heading to bed. The first night summertime, in the middle of the night, I woke up to a strange sound, a soft, rhythmic scratching. It was coming from the far wall of the cabin. I lay frozen in bed, holding my breath, listening. It was slow, deliberate, as if something or someone was tracing patterns along the wooden exterior. I reached for my phone, but the battery had died. Great. I had left my charger in the car, and there was no way I was going outside. The scratching continued for what felt like an eternity before stopping abruptly. Then came the knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Knock. Knock. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. No one should have been up here. No one even knew I was here. Then I heard it. A whisper that drifted through the keyhole. So faint, I almost thought I had imagined it. Emily. I stumbled backward, heart hammering in my chest. The voice was raspy, unnatural. It didn't sound like someone calling my name. It sounded like something trying to remember how to say it. I locked myself in my bedroom and stayed awake until the sun rose. The second night he should have left that morning. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I convinced myself it had all been a bad dream. Maybe I thought that whatever it was wouldn't come back. I was wrong. That night, it returned. The sun set, and as the sky darkened, my fear grew. I sat on the couch, gripping my phone, waiting for something to happen, and then it did. The knocking started again. Knock, but this time, it wasn't just the door. It came from the walls, the windows, even the roof. And then I heard the voice again. Emily, let me in. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. I opened the camera app and pointed it at the window, barely able to breathe. And then, it moved. The thing outside stepped closer, just enough that I could see it more clearly. Its face, if it even had one, was a distorted mass of shadows, shifting and writhing as if it couldn't settle on a single form. I screamed. The escape. Don't remember making the decision to run. One moment, I was frozen in terror. and the next, I was grabbing my keys and bolting for the front door. The second I stepped outside, the temperature plummeted. My breath turned to mist as I sprinted toward my car. Something moved behind me. I didn't dare look. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking uncontrollably. When I finally managed to unlock the door, I threw myself inside and turned the ignition. The headlights flickered on, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. The figure stood at the edge of the forest, its twisted form barely distinguishable from the trees around it, but its face was grinning. I slammed the car into reverse and sped down the mountain road, barely able to see through the tears, blurring my vision. Mysterious whispers in the forest AM Lucy. Even as I write this, my skin crawls with fear. The only reason I'm telling this story is to prove that what we experienced was real. When Jason and I decided to go camping in the wilderness for a few days, it seemed like an ordinary adventure. But we realized too late that we were not alone in that forest. The first couple of days were enjoyable. We sat by the fire, told stories, and gazed at the stars. Nature was breathtaking, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of unease deep inside me. At first, I thought it was just my mind adjusting to the environment, but on the second night, I woke up to a strange whisper, and that was when I knew something was very wrong. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the whispers were structured, almost like someone was speaking. I nudged Jason and whispered, "Jason, do you hear that?" He stirred slightly, but didn't wake up. I sat still, listening intently. The sound seemed to come from just outside our tent, but whenever I tried to pinpoint its source, it shifted, always staying just out of reach, as if luring me out. The whispers suddenly stopped, but I could sense something moving in the forest. Straining my eyes, I thought I saw a shadowy figure lurking in the bushes. My body froze with fear. Swallowing my panic, I retreated into the tent and shook Jason awake. "There's something out there," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But how could I even explain what I had seen? The next morning, I told Jason everything. He laughed at first, but stopped when he saw how serious I was. "Maybe it was just an animal," he suggested, but I knew better. Something was watching us that day. We decided to explore the area around our camp. As we walked, we stumbled upon strange tracks in the soil. They resembled human footprints, but they were unnaturally large and spaced too far apart, as if whatever had left them wasn't walking, it was leaping. That night, the whispers returned. This time, Jason heard them, too. We sat frozen by the fire, listening. Then, from the shadows, I saw it again, a silhouette shifting in the darkness. Jason shone his flashlight, but the instant the beam landed on the figure, it vanished. Back inside the tent, the whispers grew louder, clearer. No longer a single voice, but many, overlapping, whispering urgently. My heart pounded in my chest. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The rustling outside grew heavier and slow. Deliberate footsteps circled our tent. We held our breath, paralyzed. At dawn, I immediately played back the recording. My blood ran cold. The whispers had formed words. "Go back. You do not belong here." We decided to leave that very day. As we packed up, the eerie sense of being watched intensified. Whatever it wasn't done with us yet. As we pulled out the last tent stake, the wind suddenly died. The entire forest fell into an unnatural silence. No birds, no insects, just a heavy, oppressive stillness. Jason turned to me, whispering, "Lucy, something is very wrong." That was when we heard it. A long, deep wail echoed from within the trees. It sounded almost human, but not quite. My whole body went rigid with fear. I clenched my teeth to keep from screaming. Jason grabbed my arm, and we ran to the car. As Jason started the engine, I glanced at the back seat. For a split second, I saw it, a hazy, shadowy figure sitting there, watching us. We sped down the dirt road, desperate to escape, but I knew, deep down, we were still being watched. The misty handprint on the car window told me one thing: our story was far from over.